Hi everyone and welcome along. As winter transitions into spring here in Devon, it's a great opportunity to paint some snow and flowers just poking up through. So we're going to paint some hellebores in the snow today. So grab your paints and let's get started. Right then, so I'm going to just mix up a few colours. Snow is an interesting one because it is, of course it is white, but we need to be able to see it on the page. So it's all about finding light and shade and what it's reflecting. So I'm going to mix up this shadow mix, and whilst I do that, I'm just going to tell you about our sponsors today, Skillshare. And Skillshare for 2023 have a new campaign, and that is What's Next? It's all about subscribing to something better, because it's so good if you're able to take a bit more control of your career path and also your creative path. So today I wanted to talk to you about one that I've been doing, Gardening 101, a guide for growing and caring for plants. Because I paint a lot of flowers, a lot of plants like we're doing today, and I really want this year to get out in my garden and make the most of what we've got out there and try something new and just have a bit more knowledge about it. So I'm using this brilliant class by Geraldine Lavin, who's a herbalist and farmer, and it's just a fantastic place, Skillshare, because you can explore the class library. There's so much in there. So for me this year, this is what I want to do. I want to broaden my horizons, both with my creative and business side of my life. But today, I wanted to talk to you about the gardening class that I am really looking forward to doing. And the wonderful people at Skillshare are giving us a 1 month free trial for the first 1,000 people to use the link in the episode notes below. So head on down to those episode notes, and now we can enjoy the tutorial. So to begin with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw in some stems, 2 stems that are just a little bit hooked, that have poked up out of the snow, and these are hellebores. So the hellebore, we have the sort of drooping head of the flower, so continuing along that line allows us to sort of see where the shape is going. That's helpful. And then up the back, this little line here is where a lot of the leaves sort of fan out from behind, and also we often get little buds growing. But that's all we need. So if you're at home, obviously for me, filming wise, I like to draw a little bit heavier so you can see what I'm doing. But now what I would recommend is you give that a light rub out with your eraser so that it's much easier to it's going to disappear much more easily, and it's going to be much more easy to rub out once you've finished painting. Okay, so I was just getting a bit of Alizarin Crimson mixed up there, and I think I'll wake up the permanent rose as well, and we're going to make a nice sort of crimson-y petal. And I am going to begin also with this green mix here. We've got green gold and sap green mixed together as well, and I'm going to really dilute that down. And between this colour and this, we're going to create the flower of the hellebore. I'm going to use a size 4 brush, and I'm going to begin with my lighter colour here. I've got a wet brush with not a huge amount of colour on it, and I'm going to paint a petal, a little bit of a pointed end, and I'm going to take some of this crimson colour and sort of paint it in to that green petal shape. It's interesting, these 2 colours, they're sort of on the complementary colour scale, and I would encourage you not to sort of mess about with sort of faffing around with getting the 2 overly blended in with each other. But also we're painting with not very much water on our brush. You see I'm just lifting it off there. So the blend is quite a sort of gentle blend, and it's not a huge sort of pool of water going on. I'm just going to peel that off there as well. So we end up with these really nice sort of light petals that aren't sort of overloaded with water or colour. You can see I'm just leaving a tiny bit of unpainted space between them, just the littlest bit. And then, before I do that, I'll just lift off a little bit of that water. So you can do that with a clean wet brush, just lift that excess water off, and then I'm going to place it in there. And then just a few brush strokes. There we go. So that's looking really nice. Quite often I paint sort of a layer of petals in the background first, but I like to sort of just do things differently every now and then. So I'm trying placing them in the front, and then we might just sort of drop in a little bit in the gaps in the background. By the way, it is so wonderful to have so many of you enjoying our tutorials. It is just wonderful, and your comments really do mean everything to me. I love reading them. I read every single one, and it also helps the channel massively, so thank you. So if you're watching right now and you're enjoying what you're seeing, why don't you hit the like button, just very easily, and you can comment below to let me know how you're finding this one if you're painting along. So you can see I'm just adding these little extra petals, adding the second colour, and doing this all with the size 4 brush, which is really quite cool when you're doing petals like this. It seems quite unlikely you'd be able to do this. Anyway, so those are settling in really nicely. I'm now going to take some burnt sienna. The other thing I do really like about the size 4 brush is you can often do most of a painting in the single brush. Yeah, it's quite often the case. Okay, so we've got a nice sort of claret colour, I suppose, for the stem, and what I'm going to do is just travel up the pencil line and then thin it out a little bit, and just allow a tiny bit of a little bit of a drop in there, but I will just lift it up so it doesn't go too far, or just spread it out a little bit. There we go. And now I'm going to take some more Sap Green, and we're going to place in some leaves. So I'm just going to mix it into that wash we had earlier. And I'm doing this all sort of fairly loosely with sort of quite big brush strokes, allowing for bleeds and blends. So we've got a sort of 3-pronged leaf on this hellebore, and they're curling off backwards. You can have them sort of overlapping each other a little bit. That's quite fun. And that's looking good to me. Now I am going to go down to a smaller brush now. I've gone down to my smallest brush, that's a 4/10. What I want to do is take some of that Alizarin Crimson, and I just want to send it through some of those leaves, and also a little bit more through the top of the stem there. And what we've got now is a fairly sort of simple, quite loose watercolour hellebore. Some people would be quite happy to leave it like that, but we're about halfway through. So I'm just going to let this dry and then we'll get on to the next stage. Okay, so that's all looking nice and dry. What we're going to do now is look inside the flower, and I'm going to add a little bit of cadmium yellow to my green gold mix, and we're going to put in all the lovely little filaments and anthers. So imagine that line from the stem protruding out, and I'm going to just paint in with my 4/10 brush a series of little loops and blobs. They can bleed into each other, that's fine, but what we just want to see is some of that little sort of business going on in the centre. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of Paynes Grey and add it to that mix that we had for the stem, and I'm just going to create just a little bit. They've got little sort of ridges on the stems there, and then I'll just use it as a little bit of a sort of shadowy tone. And then I'm going to use the rigger brush for a little bit of detail on the leaves and the petals. So I'm just going to take some Alizarin Crimson, and we're going to just run it down some of these petals. So I'm using it quite dilute. And what we're going to do after I've got these quite sort of strong lines is we're going to just do a little bit of a wash over the top of it, because I think that can be quite daunting for a lot of people when painting these kinds of things, is you just don't want to feel like you're ruining it. But you're not, trust me. Watercolour is all about building up layers and also making discoveries rather than mistakes. Okay, so I've done that. Take a clean, it's very important, it's a clean brush. In fact, I'm going to change my water over to make sure my brush is definitely clean. Doesn't matter that's drying a little bit. And then with my size 4 brush, I'm just going to smooth out those petal details. So look at that. So just make sure that you are travelling the brush along the same path as the lines of detail you put in beforehand. And then I think what's quite nice is to just take a little bit of the Alizarin Crimson and just drop it in at the top. So it's nice that we can find things to do whilst other elements are drying. So I'm going to just place in these petals, petal details, and then we'll do them on the leaves. So I've got some Sap Green. I'm just going to add it into this mix here, the stem mix, the dark stem mix, and get a bit of that Alizarin Crimson there. So we're making a mixture for these leaf lines, because the dye of the petals really does run through the whole of this flower, the whole of this plant. So this is what the rigger brush is so brilliant for, those long slender lines. There we go. So it's time to add in the next sort of section of our flower here. So we need a few petals on the underside. So I'm going to use my dilute Alizarin Crimson and imagine that petal coming right out down there. And one just poking out down there. So I'm using more dilute colour. So we'll have one there. And one that we're probably not going to see a huge amount of. Right, whilst we're waiting for that to dry, we can have a little look at the snow. So, as I said, I mixed up this colour earlier, and what I want to do, so this is a shadow mix of burnt sienna, Paynes Grey, but also a little bit of green. There's a tiny bit of green in there. And what I want to do is just start by building up a little landscape of colour by really sort of angling my brush low to the page. Just being careful, sort of not disturb the flowers too much, but also I quite like the idea at the base where it comes out that we can have a little bit of that colour. And now I'm going to take a bit more Paynes Grey and get a smaller brush. I've got a size 2 here. What I want to do is now sort of dot this Paynes Grey in and amongst, and sort of use it to create a lumpy, sort of snowy, frosty crystal texture. But the key thing is that you just sort of have lots of nice sort of dry brushed, rough and soft edges, nothing sort of too clean and neat. Okay, so we are going to let everything dry and then do one last little look for some detail. Right, so I've rubbed out the pencil as well, and gosh, if I was able to rub out the pencil when I drew it really quite heavily at the beginning, then you'll definitely be able to. So now it's time for little bits of detail, so I'm going to get a little bit more sort of dark colour. This is the colour I've used actually on the leaf detail, and I want to just bring that in to the base of the plants there. Now just a bit of Paynes Grey shadow, a little bit on some of the leaves there. It's also helpful if you've painted one that sort of overlapped with another, you can just define that a little bit. I'm also going to place just a little bit on the sort of side of the flower that's just reaching down the back, and then I'm going to mix a little bit more in there and just use this shadow mix to help define those little anthers and filaments, and then also the sort of stamen. So imagine that coming out there. We won't really be able to see that one. And a little bit of a dot of the yellow. And yeah, this is the point where I just sort of start to find like nice little places I can add maybe a little touch of the darker colour to the tips of the petals. And then also, what I think is really quite key is placing in little shoots of green coming up through the snow. And then one last little bit of shadow in the snow. And there we have some hellebores in the snow for you. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. I want to say a massive thank you to our sponsor Skillshare, and don't forget that the first 1,000 of you who click the link in the episode notes below will get a free month's trial of Skillshare. And of course, if you like this video, then hit the like button and comment below to let me know how you got on with it. And if you never want to miss another video, then hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell, and we'll see you again next time. Bye!